My boss's girlfriend fired me over a Snapchat post, then begged me to come back. I'm the top salesperson who brings in millions in revenue for the company. Just because I didn't compliment her looks in the company Snapchat group, she fired me without hesitation. She replaced me with her cousin. Until later, when the company's sales plummeted to zero, she came to apologize to me in person. Please come back. My boyfriend said he'd break up with me if you don't return. The boss went on a business trip for a month and left his girlfriend in charge of the company. Who knew that her first act as the new boss would be to target me? At 10 a.m., I arrived at the office on time. I saw my colleague looking nervous, pointing at the boss's office and whispering, "Tiffany's here. She wants to see you." Tiffany Fox was the boss's new girlfriend, known for her arrogance and bullying. She would curse at anyone she didn't like. Once, when a female colleague stayed a bit longer in the boss's office to report work, Tiffany spread rumors that she was a prostitute. She bullied that girl so much that she was forced to resign. But because Tiffany was sweet-talking and good at flattery, the boss usually let her do whatever she wanted. I didn't expect her to target me now. I put down my coffee and pushed open the door to enter the office. As soon as I entered, a file flew towards my face. "Do you know what time it is? Company policy states work starts at 8 a.m. Why are you coming in at 10? The sharp edge of the file folder left a bloody cut on my forehead. I held my head, looking at Tiffany, who was throwing her weight around behind the desk. My 10 a.m. start time was a perk for being the top salesperson. Everyone in the company knew about this unwritten rule. Years ago, when the boss's company was about to go bankrupt, they accidentally hired me. In my first month, I generated $5 million in sales, bringing the company back from the brink of death. Since then, the boss had treated me like a precious asset, usually listening to my opinions on major decisions. She slammed the table, her face contorted with rage. "Look at your punch card. You've been coming in at 10 for a whole month. Do you think you're above company rules? According to company policy, 3 consecutive days of tardiness can result in termination. You can get out now." I looked at Tiffany in disbelief. "You're firing me? Did you ask the boss? I created 80% of the company's profits, and she dared to fire me?" Tiffany snorted coldly, looking at me with disdain. "You're just a salesperson, a lousy peddler. What's wrong with me firing you? 3:24 p.m. This is my boyfriend's company. I'm the boss's girlfriend. I can fire whoever I want. The boss had treated me well, so I couldn't just leave like this." I sat down on the sofa. "You should ask for the boss's opinion first." Tiffany rolled her eyes. "Who do you think you are?" Saying this, she directly called the boss.
The boss's voice on the other end sounded tired. "What's the matter?" Tiffany, who had just been yelling at me in a shrill voice, immediately softened her tone, cooing, "Honey, I miss you." The boss sighed. "Just tell me what you want." Tiffany glanced at me triumphantly. "There's a salesperson who doesn't follow the rules, always coming in late. I want to fire him. Whatever. I need to rest now." The boss casually agreed and hung up. Tiffany looked at me arrogantly. "Did you hear that? I can fire whoever I want. Now get out." I laughed coldly, looking at Tiffany. "Are you sure? If the boss comes back and finds out you fired me, he might get angry." I kindly reminded her. After all, headhunters had been trying to poach me with high offers for years, but out of loyalty to the boss, I had always stayed. My leaving wouldn't affect me at all, but Tiffany might not be so lucky. Tiffany glared at me, her face twisted with arrogance and tyranny. "Who do you think you are? You're just a salesperson. I'm my boyfriend's future wife, the mistress of this company. Do you think he'd choose you over me?" Hearing her say this, I shook my head. If that's how it is, so be it. I turned and left the office. Outside, my colleagues had heard our argument but didn't know what happened. They kept looking at me. "Boss, what's going on?" I started packing my things efficiently, smiling. "What's going on?" "I got fired, that's what." My colleagues' eyes widened, looking at me in disbelief. "Fire you? Has Tiffany gone crazy? Everyone knows you're the boss's golden goose. Isn't she afraid the boss will break up with her?" I shook my head and chuckled. "Well, that's not my problem anymore. After all, it's her decision. She'll have to bear the consequences. Besides, I've been working for so many years, it might be nice to take a good rest." I had long ago saved enough money to be financially independent, but I had never taken a break and felt too embarrassed to ask. This was a perfect opportunity. My colleague was furious. "But why did she fire you? Did you offend her somehow?" "Boss," I frowned, thinking carefully. "I guess it's because last time when she spread rumors about Zoe, I stood up for Zoe, remember? 320 for since then, she's been picking on me, always finding fault one way or another. Yesterday, Tiffany uploaded a photo of herself to the company WhatsApp group, and everyone was flooding the comments with compliments. I was the only one who read it without replying. I guess that was the final straw. Should I call the boss now? You're the backbone of the company. You can't just leave like this." I shook my head, smiling lightly. "Forget it. If I ever come back, it'll be after Tiffany and the boss break up. I really can't stand her behavior anymore." We'll see in the future. I finished packing my things and headed to the finance department to collect my salary for the month. I had only worked for 10 days this month, but my salary and commission amounted to $100,000.
I informed the finance staff about my termination and asked her to transfer the salary to my account later. Unexpectedly, Tiffany suddenly appeared at the company entrance. Glaring at me, Tiffany became agitated. She came forward and grabbed my clothes. "Are you deaf? What are you doing in the finance department? These are all important company documents. Get out now, or I'll call the police." I frowned and forcefully shook off Tiffany's hand. "Let go. Now that I've been fired. Is there a problem with me collecting my salary for this month? I'm already being nice by not asking for severance pay." Tiffany glared at the young girl in front of me. "How much is his salary?" The finance girl answered honestly, $100,500. Tiffany's face immediately changed. "How much?" After the finance girl repeated it, she pointed at me and said, "You violated company rules by being late, so your salary for this month is forfeited." I laughed coldly, a $200 deduction for each tardiness. "Is that how you calculate? Did you even graduate elementary school?" To my surprise, Tiffany looked at me righteously. "It's a new rule I made. 3 tardies and your whole month's salary is gone. Now get out. What right do you have to make rules?" Tiffany crossed her arms, her mouth gaping like a shark, shamelessly saying, "I'll have a share in this company in the future. What's wrong with me making rules?" I couldn't be bothered to argue with her. "Then you can expect a lawsuit from me." With that, I strode out. I drove home and had just put my things away when I saw a group message from Tiffany in the company Snapchat group that I hadn't left yet. From now on, everyone must reply to any messages I post on Snapchat or WhatsApp. Those who don't reply will be fired like that person today. It seems she really fired me because I didn't join in praising her. The boss really hit the jacknet with this girlfriend of his. I know you'll judge me. Call me a coward for what I've done when you find my lifeless body lying in a pool of blood. But soon, you'll understand. My body won't give you the answers you seek. This letter will. It started a month ago, the night I first found her. She was powerless then, just a figment of my imagination, a character from my novella. Before I tell you more, I have to warn you. Don't let curiosity get the better of you. You shouldn't want to know her. I named her Mara. I wanted to create a tale of triumph rising from tragedy. And so, I began with tragedy. She grew up in a small, nameless village. Her life ordinary and uneventful, until that day, when she was just 8 years old. She came home from school to find the front door ajar. Her parents had fought before, but this time, the silence inside was suffocating. She stepped in and saw her mother lying on the floor and moving, a dark crimson pool spreading around her. Her father stood frozen, a bloodied vase still clutched in his hand. For a moment, time stopped. There was no sound, just a faint ringing in Mara's ears as she stared in disbelief. Then, the silence broke, shattered by her scream. I know how it sounded because I heard it. That night, it was piercing, raw, and filled with so much pain it made my chest tighten. I thought I was imagining it. A writer caught up in his own story, I told myself, and I continued to write. Her father had called it an accident. He forced Mara to lie, and when she refused, he beat her. I wrote about her sobs, the way her small body shook under his blows. That night, I heard her cry, soft, muffled sobs that came from nowhere and everywhere. It wouldn't stop. By the second sleepless night, I wanted to quit. The story was taking a toll on me, but I couldn't. Something kept pulling me back, like I wasn't in control anymore. So I kept writing. At 14, Mara ran away. She couldn't take it anymore. Her father's rage, his fists, his lies. She spent her first winter on the streets, alone. I wrote about her suffering, the way the cold gnawed at her bones, the hunger twisting her stomach, her hollow, desperate eyes. That night, I felt the cold seep through my skin. Even though my heater was on, I felt the ache of hunger. Even though I had eaten, I heard her breath, so faint, but unmistakably there. It was like she wanted me to feel her pain. The more I wrote, the louder she became. Her story bled into my reality, and I started to believe it wasn't just a story anymore. I thought about deleting everything, ending it right there. But I couldn't. A part of me liked it. It made me feel alive. It challenged me. I wanted to push her further, to see how much more she could endure, how much more I could endure. So I kept going. I wrote about the men who found her on the street. They dragged her into the trunk of their car, driving her to a secluded cabin. I wrote how their nails scratched her skin, their cruelty tearing her apart. That night, I woke up screaming. I felt nails clawing at my flesh, invisible hands pinning me down. I couldn't fight back. When it was over, I looked at my arms and saw the scratches. Deep, red welts that hadn't been there before. This wasn't just my imagination anymore. I could see the marks. Real, physical, undeniable. I had to stop. But then, she whispered. She told me I couldn't stop, that it wasn't my story. It was hers. I wasn't creating it. I was uncovering it. And the more I unraveled, the stronger she became. She made me write this letter. She said you need to know her story. that with every person who learns about her, she grows stronger, more real. Maybe she's done toying with me. Why else would she make me write how it ends? A swift slash of her wrist. A crimson pool surrounding her, just like her mother's. I know what's going to happen to me tonight. If you're reading this, it's probably already too late for you too. Girlfriend of 5 years got pregnant by my brother and had me pay for the abortion. Found out by accident years later. It started like any other night. My girlfriend of 5 years and I decided to hit the backroads for a little joyride. The kind of simple fun that had become a tradition in our small town. We grabbed a rack of beer, invited my younger brother and his lady friend to join, and set off into the night. I had a few beers, 3 or 4 at most, but called it early. I had an early shift the next morning and didn't want to overdo it. They dropped me off at home, promising they'd keep the night alive for a bit longer. I kissed her goodbye, figuring she'd be back in an hour or two, then climbed into bed, sometime in the middle of the night. I woke up, my bladder screaming for attention. As I shuffled to the bathroom, I noticed her side of the bed was still empty. A quick glance at my phone showed no missed calls or texts. I shot her a message, something casual, and went back to sleep. By the time my alarm blared a few hours later, she was home. She bounced into bed with an almost suspicious amount of energy, waking me up with morning sex like everything was perfectly normal. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I showered, kissed her goodbye, and headed to work. Weeks passed. And then came the bombshell. She was pregnant. My heart raced. We weren't planning for kids, and I'd always been meticulous about using protection. But accidents happen, right? We chalked it up to a defective condom. After some tearful conversations, we agreed to terminate the pregnancy. It wasn't an easy decision, but we faced it together. Or so I thought. I took time off work to support her through it. I drove her to the clinic, paid for the procedure, and spent days making sure she was comfortable and cared for. Looking back now, I realize how blind I was. I thought I was being a good partner. Instead, I was being played. It wasn't until years later, after we broken up, that I learned the truth. My younger brother and I were catching up over beers when her name came up. It was a casual mention at first, but he stumbled over his words, his face turning red. Something was off. I pressed him, and that's when he cracked. Apparently, the night I went home early, they dropped his lady friend off shortly after. That left just the two of them driving aimlessly. One thing led to another, and she parked the car. According to him, she initiated it, but he didn't stop her. He didn't even try. Hearing this, I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. I couldn't believe it. My girlfriend of 5 years, the woman I thought I'd marry one day, had cheated on me with my own brother. Worse, the pregnancy I grieved and paid to terminate wasn't even mine. For a long time, I didn't know how to process it. I wanted to be angry at her, at him, at myself for being so blind. It wasn't until another mutual friend confirmed the story years later that it all truly sank in. She'd taken advantage of both of us in different ways, and I'd been too trusting to see it. Now, looking back, I see all the cracks I missed. The signs were there if I'd only paid closer attention. But hindsight is a cruel teacher, and some lessons come at the cost of everything you thought you knew.